Episode 6 of No Huddle. So Justin and I just recorded what I think was our best episode. And as I was clicking some things maybe a little too quickly, the idiot I am deleted it all. So we have Bucs at Falcons discussion for you tonight. We are going to re-record this because we are professionals. We felt like the info that we had out there was really, really good. And now look, we're a little bit quicker finding the data that we think matters. So this will be a sub 30-minute episode. Justin, thanks for bearing with me and doing this again.
Thanks for having me. It's always my pleasure. I don't care how many times we do this. I can.
Let's go.
It's only 10:30 here. I can talk all night. I can
I
talk
love that.
football all night.
Like I said in Cage Match a week ago now, when you and I were talking about doing this, you said like, "Hey, I don't care if we do this for one person. Like, I just like talking football." And once I heard that, I was like, "Let's do it, man!" Like, you and I chat football almost every single night, and I think the idea of coming together and just being able to post some stuff that we think is relevant, chat with more people who also love football. That was our whole goal here. Just a little bit more of a community feeling.
Totally spot on.
Awesome. So we were chatting Bucs at Falcons, and all encompassing, we think this is going to be a really fun game. The over under, depending on where you look, is sitting around 44 total points. And it's a really close game, a point spread of 1.5. I should call out that we are about 20 hours before kickoff. And so keep track of, any late breaking news, coach speak, inactives. Our good buddy Neil does an awesome show in the hour leading up to lock that I highly recommend checking out for any late breaking news and deep dives. We're not going to go deep into the data, but we are going to call out what's interesting to us. Justin, what's your overarching thoughts about this game?
Yeah, kind of like what I was saying in our first recording. I think this game, as far as the primetime games we've had so far this
Yeah.
season, I think this one's going to be one of the more exciting games. There's some kind of what you were saying, some data points that kind of point towards that.
Yeah.
If you just look at Sabre, they have this projected at 45.3 total points. Tampa Bay 22.3, Atlanta 23.0. And I went ahead and looked over at FanDuel. They have it at 43.5. So I went ahead and took that over. I think this game has the potential to go, I'm not going to say way over, but
Yeah.
definitely over 43.5 points.
Yeah, we mentioned I am going to Vegas tomorrow, and I'll be there before the game starts. I think that's one of the bets that I'm going to put in is that over 44.5, depending on what it lands at. From a game perspective, pure winner of the game, I see Falcons favored by 1.5. Do you have any feelings on the actual spread of this game?
I really don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see it coming down to the last drive, and it's say 24-20,
Yeah.
give or take whatever team you want.
Yeah.
And then, they're driving, they throw a pick with 10 seconds left, they kneel it out. And,
Yeah.
it ends up being a 4 point victory rather than a 1 point, 1.5, or whatever the spread ends up being. But it was actually a lot closer than a 4 point game.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. We talked a lot of DFS, and I wanna talk DFS again. Our play for Showdown, what I typically do is about, I usually max out the big 150 entry. I think on Thursday nights it's typically like $20 per entry, maybe 15, something like that. So I like to kind of take some risks and go a little outside of the box, play some low owned guys, maybe take some stands with captains and whatnot. Justin, what's your typical showdown play like?
I'm not a huge showdown player. What I usually do is I stick to like the 20 max entry, the 3 entry max, and then I usually have a single entry lineup that I really like that I do for our coach contest and whatnot.
Yeah.
Um, this one I'll probably dabble with a little bit more just because I like this game so much. You know me, I don't like playing defenses and kickers, and the
Hmm.
first few weeks you've kind of needed those guys in order to
Yeah.
be optimal. But I think this game has a lot of avenues to where you don't necessarily need that.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. My stance on kickers is look, I think they're a fine play, but they're unpredictable, right? And if they're going to be owned 20+%, 30+% in the field, and SaberSim, Fantasy Points, Roto Grinders, you name it, they all have a really good projection, ownership projection that if you're looking to play DFS, that's a good spot to go to. But kickers are a little bit hard to predict, and if they're going to be highly owned, they're probably someone that I'm going to avoid, especially when, to your point, there's some value out there. And I want to talk about that injury news because Adam Schefter earlier today tweeted that for the Bucs, both wide receivers, Jalen McMillan and Trey Palmer, are going to be out. And I think because we saw a lot of this last week with McMillan out and Trey Palmer only played about 11% of snaps, what we saw last week is probably what we're going to see this week. And what we saw last week was Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. No surprise there, the 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then wide receiver 3 was Sterling Shepard, playing about 65% of snaps. We've seen him in his Giant days. He has the ability to break out some long receptions. And at only 1,600, he's certainly well within the range. I actually think he's probably coming in a little bit under-owned right now. In the flex, they have him projected at 16%. I wouldn't be surprised if he's 25% plus. You're planning on playing some of him?
Oh, totally. Absolutely. And someone else I think you should definitely have in your player pool is, at $200, K Johnson. I'm drawing a blank on his first name. We were saying his name earlier, and can't
Cameron.
remember it.
Yeah,
Cameron with a K.
Yeah, yep.
$200. I think you were saying he was around 30%, 35% of the snaps last week.
Yeah.
With their injuries, if he's out there for that many snaps and he's only $200, if he catches one pass for 20 yards, he's optimal.
Yeah, you nailed it. Yeah, if you can get somebody who's going to be on the field, I don't care if his reception line is 1 or 1.5 or whatnot. If you get somebody on the field who's going to play a third of the snaps at 200, he is well within your player pool. Right now, his projection is really low. His fantasy point projection is 1.5. His ownership is 1.5. I would envision that ownership going up. Not that necessarily we need the salary relief, because to our point earlier, there's Sterling Shepard. There's a couple other guys that are medium price that I want to talk about in a second. But look, if you need some salary relief, I think Cameron Johnson's your guy. You're also going to see probably in right before lock that they have elevated probably a receiver named Cody Thompson, mainly to play wide receiver 5 backup role and or some special teams. He's probably not somebody that I'm going to prioritize, but if you want to kind of mix and match your $200 plays, I think he's fine, right? Again, anybody who's going to see the field at 200 is worth a shot in Showdown.
Totally agree. Do you mind if I share my screen?
Yeah, let's do it. Let me pull that up. Yeah, if you hit present, then I'll share on my end. There we go. All right, you're up.
All right. So I went ahead and got ahead of ourselves. I went ahead and built 20 lineups. I sent it for this big 20 entry 400K play action. Went ahead and ran it. Did the projected win rate. Did that. Spit out 20 lineups. What I like to look at is my exposure for what it spit out. Going into this, I wanted to make sure I had a minimum of like 15 and 20 for Bijan and Kirk.
Yeah.
I really like this spot for both of them. You could really see it. Also, Bucky Irving, kind of what we were saying. Both of these defenses, as far as stuff rates go, could see a big day for both of these running backs. And as far as running backs on the ground go for Tampa Bay, if I see one of these guys popping, I think it's going to be Bucky Irving. Just from watching the tape from both of these guys on the ground, I think Bucky Irving is a lot more efficient in between the tackles. So I could see him popping off, especially in this captain spot. I really like.
Yeah, Fantasy Points does a great job with their data set, and something that I like to look at is stuff rate. Stuff rate being on first down, is the defense stopping a rush to under 4 yards? How often? And on second and third down or fourth down under 3 yards. And both of these two rush defenses are two of the worst in the league. I think it's Bucs are the worst and Falcons are third worst, and I might have that flip flop. But ultimately, these are awful rush defenses, which is interesting because the Bucs historically last season were a really great spot to throw the ball on, and it looks like they've flipped that this year. They are
Completely flipped the
towards the
script.
best of the league. It's wild. They're towards the best of the league against the pass, and towards the bottom of the league against the run. I think this is a really good opportunity to target some of the running backs. And crazily enough, I don't think it's out of the question to, if you're doing 20 max, to have all four of those running backs in your player pool.
Yeah, and I'll flip it over here to the flex so we can kind of get into that. I mean, I'm not very interested in Rashad White as a captain. I
Yeah,
don't see
that's
his
fair.
ceiling being too incredibly crazy, especially at his salary point. Um, and then Bijan, I mean, Tyler Algier, I mean, if you wanted to be just really different and one of your 150 max entries, maybe include him in your captain
Yeah.
spot. But
If there's
as
like a
far as
Bijan injury or something.
yeah, exactly. And then with the flex, I'm just gonna, just keep them included in the player pool. But flipping over to the flex, 70% Baker, 60% Chris Godwin. We love that, especially with AJ Terrell, who's gonna be shadowing Mike Evans most of the game.
Yeah.
Um, Ray McLeod, I don't know why it's loving him too entirely much, but he's popping. Don't hate it.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
don't kind of feel indifferent about it.
Yeah.
Um, Got Kirk Cousins, love it. Love everything else. There's the Sterling Shepard play, got 25%. Don't hate it. Mike Evans, 5%. It looks like it boosted him up a little bit since I've been tinkering a little bit.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll touch on those receivers really quick. Mike Evans, to your point, is going to be shadowed by AJ Terrell. And the Falcons have been pretty decent against the pass, especially deep balls. And on a fantasy point per route run, Mike Evans was at 0.18 fantasy
hmm
points per route run. Chris Godwin at 0.34 in this matchup in the defense, their defensive alignment. So with that being said, I think this could be a really good Chris Godwin smash spot.
I totally agree. I'm right there with you.
Let's talk pick six, because I think what we tried to do in our last recording, which was a lot of fun, was build a couple prop parlays. And I'm not going to be able to do this while I'm in Vegas, so I want to share my screen
Go
and
ahead.
do a little bit of a prop parlay building while we're here. All right. So clean screen here. What the first thing that we noticed was defensive stats now available on pick six, which I think is interesting. I'm not a defensive savant. I think there's probably really good data sets out here that you could probably pick apart a couple of these lines and feel pretty strongly about where you land. For purposes of today, we're not going to spend the time doing it. We're going to stick to offense. And let's go category by category here. To my point earlier, Falcons are pretty good now Falcons are in the middle against the pass, and Bucks are pretty good against the pass this year. How do you feel about both of these lines here?
Yeah, I mean, if I just felt like I had to take something just because I think this is an over spot, I would take more for both of these guys. But as
Yeah,
far as this goes, I would stay away from it just because I could also see both offenses finding success on the ground and just kind of sticking to that. So this
yeah,
is something I would just stay away from.
yeah. I think that's fair. We talked about it earlier. The Godwin matchup is great. The Evans matchup is bad. How do you feel about a little over under action on both of these two guys?
Yeah, I like it, especially if AJ Terrell is going to be on Mike Evans. I
Yeah.
have a lot of respect for his game. I think he's really good.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. The other thing that sticks out to us, I think both, is Bucky Irving receiving line. We
Yes.
saw Rashad White kind of play a little bit of a third down receiving role, but Bucky Irving holds his own in receiving at 14 yards his first game, 14 yards his second game, and 6 last game. His reception line, if we keep scrolling over, is 1.5. I think he beats 6.5 receiving yards, potentially in one catch. And if we both envision Rashad White to get less and less snaps as we've seen the past 2 weeks, and Bucky Irving to get more and more as we saw last week and have heard some great coach speak, I think 6.5 is too low. And, a low line like this is a little bit questionable, a little bit thin, but we've seen some low receiving yard lines in the past, like with Justice Hill, be an absolute smash spot. Are you on board with me here with Bucky Irving?
Totally on board, especially with the amount of snaps he's seeing now. It's
Yeah.
only going to keep creeping up.
Yeah.
I think both of us kind of want to be ahead of this, his snap share increasing. We want to be on the front end of it, especially, not just as far as pick six or DFS goes, but, fantasies. You want to have him on your bench before he starts getting into that 60, 70% snap share. If he really starts taking over that role, he turns into a bell cow.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's part of the biggest edges that I think one can have in DFS, in props, in season long, is the ability to read the tea leaves, if you will, as to where the team is going, where the shares are going, where the workload is going, and certainly rather be ahead of it. And look, if you're not ahead of it, then so be it, right? You get one wrong and that's okay. But if you are right on Bucky Irving being maybe a 50-50 split this week, or maybe even favored towards Bucky Irving, he should absolutely be a smash play in DFS, and he should absolutely be able to beat this line of 6.5 receiving yards.
Definitely taking that line.
Love that. We talked about interesting. A little movement here on the Bucky Irving rushing yard line. But we talked about how both rush defenses are awful. How do you feel about what you see on screen here?
I think you and I were both talking. I think we like the Bijan over rushing right here.
Yeah, I think so too. It's counterintuitive, especially with what we saw last year with the Bucs being a really strong rush defense. There was a little bit of talk of Bijan injuring his shoulder. I think he's good to go. That could have also been a little workload management, knowing that they also had a Thursday game. 61.5 just seems too low. And I know the usage is a little bit under what we wanted to date, but I'm taking it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Totally agree. And as far as DFS goes, I mean, you got to keep Tyler Algier in your player pool just because of the success people's been having on the ground against the Bucs. Tyler Algier is a very good running back. He is.
Yes.
You watch the film, he looks good running the ball.
Yeah.
And he is very viable to break off 1-2 runs and get over this line. So
yeah,
it's somebody to definitely keep your eye on.
I totally agree. As I mentioned earlier, Bucky Irving with 1.5 reception line. I don't feel necessarily as strongly of that. He caught a couple balls, 2, 3 in his first couple games, only one last game. I think it's a good line. I would take it if you twisted my arm. But I like the 6.5 yards better.
Totally. I kind of like where we're at with these four. I think kind of what we were saying with this game possibly going over and just the way the kickers have been playing lately. Like if you wanted to make this 4 out of 4 into a 6, I think taking both kicker overs is kind of a spot that you could, easily convince me.
Yeah, I was talking with my buddy about this. If you think about NFL now, how it is, if most touchbacks are starting at the 30-yard line and kickers are hitting 50+ yarders at a rate that's record breaking, that only takes about 2 to 3 first downs to get within field goal range. Younghoe Koo is a great kicker, and 7.5 points is a 50-yarder and 3 extra points, or a 50-yarder and 1 other field goal. Like that's well within the range, especially if we think both of these offenses should be able to move the ball downfield a little bit.
Totally agree with you. I like the 4 that we had, but if you're just itching to make this a 6 out of 6, I think taking both these over, makes watching the game at least a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree. I might throw these 4 in. I actually already have the 6 pick in, so I might throw these 4 in. And typically what I like to do once I've identified a few lines is I know I'm not more times than not going to get them all right. I like to mix and match a little bit, a couple 2 pickers, 3 pickers, you name it, and go from there. So I'm going to submit this. And Justin, we've been able to carve out. I'm going to stop sharing my screen as well. We've been able to carve out about 10 to 15 minutes of looking at stats in this recording. Anything else you want to touch on?
Would you like to build one lineup together?
Let's do it. You want to do it on my side or your side?
Do it on your screen.
Yeah.
I don't really use DraftKings on my laptop much.
Yeah. Give me 1 second. Oh, I wanted to call out too, anytime that we do bets like this, anytime that we build a lineup, we're not touts. We like to do this for fun and have a good time with it. Hopefully you guys get that feel. Our recommendation is, do your own research. Don't just blindly follow us. If you want to follow us from a friendly standpoint, great. But certainly don't bet more than you can afford, and ultimately just do it for fun as we are as well.
Yeah, for me, I just hope people are able to like watch and listen to this and just
Yeah.
use it in their process into what they want to like end up on, and like hope they can like just find what we're saying and what we're using, helpful in their process.
Bingo. I love that. All right, let me share my screen here. And who you feeling for captain?
Let me pull it up on my phone. I mean, I think I'm gonna go Bijan.
Yeah,
I really do.
I like that. I off the top of my head right here, I think Godwin's going to be one of my top captains. I think Bijan will be one of my top captains. And then look, I gotta give our buddy Jesse on Twitter, downside of me, a little bit of props here. Mooney looks fantastic. And to my point earlier on Bucky Irving, I would say that Jesse was ahead of the curve there by looking at the data in week 1, where I think the field saw Ray McLeod, a little bit higher target share, but Mooney had just as much usage and opportunity as Ray. And he was not going to be owned, and he has looked fantastic ever since. So I just want to give a shout out to Jesse, and then also call out Mooney as being a viable captain play, because if he was able to break out a long touchdown, 50-plus yarder, which it's certainly within Mooney's range, he might be the captain that you need in order to win it.
I totally agree. I think I have 1 or 2 lineups in my 20.
Yeah, I think that's very fair.
Yeah.
And I know we also like the Bucky Irving captain as kind of a sneaky opportunity to rush in 2 touchdowns himself if a little bit of that workload goes more to him. So I like a few of those captain plays.
You want to take away this next flex spot?
What was that?
You want to take away this next flex spot?
Yeah, let's do it. Should we lock in Bucky here?
I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
We like both
like
running backs. We like the positions.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I feel pretty strongly about this being a really good Godwin spot. We cool throwing him in the flex?
Totally. That's exactly what I was doing next.
Love that. Salary, we have an average of 6,300. And like we talked about earlier, there's some easy salary relief, whether it be Sterling Shepard, whether it be Cameron Johnson. Ray's still playing 95% plus snaps. I mean, it's really just those 3 receivers. I don't think that he deserves some of the ownership now in hindsight that we saw in week 2, but I do believe that he deserves some ownership.
I just got ahead of myself and did this. I clicked Baker and Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I like that.
We still have enough left over for $200.
Oh, there we go. All right, let's lock that in right now. Feel good about Cameron then?
I mean, he's out there.
Yeah. I mean, look, under 700, let's see who else we have. Keith, who I don't think is playing many, because I think Warner has been playing more of the backup tight end and receiving role there. A bunch of out and IR. I think our really 2 options are Cameron Johnson and Cody Thompson. Hodge is playing a couple snaps as that wide receiver 4, but to my point earlier, we're seeing 95% plus on those 3 receivers.
Do you like that lineup?
I do. You got the only weird spot, not even weird, but the only unique spot is you have Kirk Cousins with no receiver here. But with that being said, Bijan's receiving line, I think we saw was like 27, and there was actually Bijan had a receiving touchdown last game that was brought back by a kind of semi-bogus holding call. There's a world where Baker Mayfield throws one to Godwin. Cameron Johnson gets a couple catches. Great. Bucky Irving rushes one in. Bijan rushes one in, maybe receives a touchdown from Kirk Cousins. And Kirk's receivers are a little lackluster or whatever, which we've already seen some lackluster performances from Pitts and London. I think this is very fair.
I like this lineup a lot. I like what we ended up on.
Submitting now. Cool. All right. Well, with that being said, I think we try to call it a day here, under 30 minutes, which is what we wanted to do. Justin, any final thoughts on this game?
No, if you've made it this far, thanks for stopping by.
Appreciate you guys. All right. I'm Drew. He's Justin. Thank you for being here. We're going to record another episode, so jump on in.